Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. This is the second episode of the Industry Podcast, a new esports insider podcast looking at the people, personalities behind the esports industry. I'm your host, Kerry, and today I am joined by MobileMatt Rutledge. Did I say that correct?
You did, Matt Rutledge. Nice. But yeah, MobileMatt is definitely the easiest tag for sure.
Yeah, you're well known by that one. And Matt is the co-founder of BAYZ. BAYZ is a new esports and play to earn gaming initiative. And we're going to chat a little bit about that. But first, I wanted to go into a little bit of a backstory how I invited you onto this podcast. I was listening to another podcast actually called the Metacast, and you were on there with Gabby Dizon, I think it's pronounced. And he is the co-founder of Yield Guild Games, which I don't know if too many in the esports industry are looking into the play to earn and blockchain gaming space, but they are definitely one of the leaders there. And so they're also one of your investors in BAYZ as well. So I was listening to this podcast and I thought it was super, super fascinating, and it got the wheels in my head turning because I've been looking into how the blockchain ecosystem has been slowly creeping into esports, and what you guys were talking about and how things have been developed really got me thinking about it. So I linked the episode in a tweet and I asked a bunch of questions, and then we DM'd a little bit, and I thought, hey, I mean, we can keep this in the DMs, or we can do an episode together. So I'm super happy to have you with me here today, Matt. And let's first kick off with a little bit about you, especially because maybe some of our audience know you previously from your work at Complexity Gaming or with the Aftershock Media Group. So how about a quick little trip back in time?
Yeah, sure thing. So I go back basically to the beginning of mobile esports in the United States, which is around 2015, 2016, when Clash Royale as a game launched. I was the first person to go out and contract a professional team to compete in events. And then I also ran some of the first events myself, both online and live events as well, with a series out of the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, California. And I've really just been building at the forefront of mobile esports since then. As you mentioned, I got to partner up with one of the greatest esports orgs in North America, Complexity Gaming, to spearhead their entry into mobile. I was director of mobile gaming there, and then also joined up at the largest mobile gaming talent management agency as director of business development. So spearheaded brand deals for 70 of the largest mobile games influencers around the world, stars on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all covering the mobile games genre. Then I also drove B2B initiatives, working with the mobile games publishers themselves. We at the companies handled nearly all influencer marketing in the West for PUBG Mobile and Tencent. Then also worked on quite a few events, including the Call of Duty Mobile 1-year anniversary event, PUBG Mobile 2-year anniversary event, and many more. Also delved into creator programs where I was able to create a lot of the curriculum that PUBG Mobile content creators use to learn to improve and understand best practices. So really just been very actively involved here, at the forefront of esports and working with publishers themselves. And what we've seen develop, especially over the last year, is this really incredible phenomenon that seems to just be growing quicker and quicker and getting more attention. And that is, of course, blockchain gaming. So I think that because my history was in mobile gaming and my network around the world is really deep in the mobile gaming industry, I was able to recognize it perhaps a little bit earlier than my colleagues on the PC or console based scene, because what we're finding are these play to earn games are really gaining prevalence right now in emerging markets, because that's where the people are whose lives are able to be impacted by the earning potential that these games have. So really made a huge step confidently into blockchain gaming. This was back in September or so, and founded BAYZ, which is a play-to-earn gaming guild. At this time, we're actually, I think, the fastest growing NFT gaming guild in the world. As you mentioned, Yield Guild Games is a great partner of ours and was a lead in our seed round. We also got investment from Bitcraft Ventures, from Delphi Digital, some of the best funds in the world when it comes to gaming and crypto especially. And we were also the first NFT gaming guild to actually acquire another gaming guild. It was the first acquisition of its type. And we have a lot more in store as well. So essentially what that means for those that may not be familiar with how this model works is we operate within the blockchain gaming space. So we essentially go out and acquire assets, NFTs and tokens, et cetera, within these games that are built on the blockchain. And then we utilize them within the game economies in order to generate yield and income. And generally speaking, we also go out and create earning opportunities for people, around the world. We're starting with Brazil as one key region for us as a company. But we're able to essentially, offer jobs, if you will, to people where they can earn upwards of $300-400 a month, which is a life-changing amount of money for so many people around the world. So really excited about what we have going on. We ended up raising $4 million in our seed round in order to, jumpstart operations and make our first round of investments. We've now partnered with about a dozen games so far, and just looking to grow a lot from here as well.
Yeah, I just covered the Animoca Brands and Brink Guild sort of startup incubation program that they announced the other day. And I felt that I had to sort of break down what the play to earn model looks like and how I sort of thought that this could potentially lead to a new type of org model or feed into partnerships, or this sort of way that, while the announcement really wasn't inherently having anything to do with esports or esports business, which is what Esports Insider's bread and butter is, I thought that this could be a sort of, a seed that we see later 6 months for how fast, the blockchain community moves. Maybe in 6 months, we see the first, as these guilds start graduating, maybe they become this sort of thing. So I think it's really interesting to hear about how you went from mobile, which, is obviously where developing markets really go to first. And that's where I think a majority of their esports ecosystem and infrastructure is based, to then blockchain, which is sort of, skipping a few steps in terms of how we in the West go from gaming. Okay, you start with maybe a console, and then maybe eventually you get to a PC or whatever, and people have their opinions on mobile gaming. But I'm curious to see what your thoughts are in the West of adopting to blockchain gaming, rather than just adopting cryptocurrencies or adopting NFTs and the like.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that's actually really interesting to me is, there's a bit of a stigma right now from some gamers amongst, their opinions on blockchain gaming and the role of crypto and NFTs, and whether they agree that it ought to be incorporated into video games and if there's a value add, right? And I think that it's a little bit funny in a way, because those of us that have gone back in esports have had to fight through stigma from the very beginning, right? Back when people said, "Oh, you're just playing video games. This will never be a real career, never a real industry." And of course, here we are, right? And I, of course, have been very familiar with that recently, with also the stigma around mobile gaming. And I'm usually the person as well that has to, spit the stats to really get people's attention of like, yes, there's a mobile gaming esports event that got 5.4 million peak concurrent viewers. So it's no different from me, right? This is a new industry. I'm used to kind of being at the forefront of a new, phenomenon like this. But at the same time, like, there needs to be this focus on education and getting the word out about really what blockchain gaming is, why those of us in the industry really believe that it is the future. And that is a huge focus as well for BAYZ as a company, even having a strong content focus. So if you go to bayz.gg right now, what you're going to find are 50 to 60 courses walking you through the basics of play to earn gaming. It's going to show you even just screenshots of popular games and tell you, hey, this is where you click to sign up. And then the next step is right here, right? And then even the more fundamentals about, cryptocurrency as a whole. So what is a cryptocurrency wallet? How do you make one? Right now, we're focusing on Brazil. We're porting the content as well out into the Spanish and English at the same time, just to, again, have a global impact when it comes to educating people about this industry. But I think, one of the main things that this comes down to, and why I personally just really believe in the future of blockchain gaming, is that it really comes down to ownership going to the players. And it's this incredible new phenomenon, right? Where, we've been playing video games for decades. We're used to buying skins and all of these digital assets, but we never actually truly owned them, right? As soon as we wanted to, stop playing a skin, we could not just, give it to somebody else or, trade it, let alone sell it, right? It's just kind of locked in our account. And We also can't sell our accounts. That's against terms of service for, so many games, right? And there's a lot of history in people trying to get around that, right? And what we're finding, though, is that blockchain gaming really sets up this beautiful model where, again, ownership goes to the players, and people are contributing to the in-game economy. But the people that are benefiting are not just the developer, right? Where generally developers would take 100% of the proceeds that go into these games, but they would actually be distributed amongst the players and the people. And it's this really incredible thing. So we've only seen the tip of the iceberg of what this industry is capable of, but we start to see these economies developing that are sustainable and have proper supply and demand, and different features for how cryptocurrency is used within the game, right? So that it's novel and demand stays up for people coming into the game for the first time and everything. So really, really excited. But generally, this phenomenon of ownership is the one thing that's gotten me most thrilled to be in the space and most convinced that this is the future.
Yeah, and I also think that the concept and aspect of ownership is also what can attract more people involved in esports, especially in esports orgs, to blockchain games as well, because not only can they follow sort of like the guild model of owning these assets and then, lending them to their players or trading them around to help build, their metas and everything. But there are possibilities to be working with blockchain gaming developers to develop their own assets in game that then they could potentially, lease out, or they can, be a part of the smart contract so that they can sort of monetize their IP or their likeness or whatever, that there is much more possibility for revenue in how things get developed than is in a current esports model where the revenue is hard to come by, as we all know.
100%. And actually, on that note, there's a great example of that happening very recently, even with NRG, right? Tier 1 esports org, extremely prominent at the forefront of partnerships and everything, right? And they ended up delving into blockchain gaming with a partnership with a game called Guild of Guardians, where they were able to have, their assets featured and logos featured and stuff. It's a really amazing partnership. I encourage people to look it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just looking through the sort of history that I could find with BAYZ. And so I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the roadmap that you went through in developing it. So when you left Aftershock, you co-founded BAYZ, and that was in September of 2021, last year. And then in December, you raised $4 million US dollars. And then just this month, you have appointed a new MD. So can you sort of talk about the last, 4 or 5 months? It's gone pretty quick, huh?
Yeah, it seems like an eternity in this space. It moves so quickly. But as you mentioned, ended up founding BAYZ in September. At that point, we were able to really connect strongly with Yield Guild Games and have an amazing partnership. So just also for reference, Yield Guild Games is an NFT gaming guild, but they're based in the Philippines, but they're the largest guild in the world, really. And so what we were able to do is essentially have a partnership with them to where we can use their structure as a template for us in order to build off of as a company. And they acted kind of like an accelerator. It really expedited our growth. We would not be moving this quickly right now if it was not for the support that we got early on from YGG. And so to exactly that point, we were able to use their model as a baseline and become the official Brazilian expansion of YGG. So that we can, focus on this territory, have a regional expertise. My co-founder is a phenomenal colleague of mine that's based in Brazil and has great connections there and gave us a huge leg up in operations on the ground. Essentially, a very fast growth trajectory. In December, we raised $4 million from a whole slew of leading industry funds from the crypto native investment firms. And then all throughout that time, we're lining up partnerships with a lot of different games. So we're well positioned actually across a whole host of titles. There's one genre in particular that we're focusing on that we think is going to be a great fit for Brazil, which is actually football genre games. Just with how huge football is in Brazil, and of course a global sport, but we really think that it's well suited to succeed. And there's a couple games in particular that are set up to essentially be football manager games that are built on the blockchain. So really intuitive, right? You see it for the first time and you're like, oh, I get it. I've played these games in the past, but in this game, I actually own the players and I can sell them and trade them and get, a fee for training them and stuff. So it's really an awesome fit. We're excited about the future of that. That title in particular is called Meta Soccer. There's a few in the football genre that we're delving into heavily. And then one of the main things that we focused on after closing that seed round was really getting the best people in the world on board here, and not just best in the crypto space or best in the the gaming space. We want people that have like a cross-functional expertise across all these different categories, and really to go out and get the best. And that's exactly who we've been able to find. You mentioned the MD that we hired recently. That's Guy Barbosa, formerly the head of global gaming at TikTok. Ended up leaving TikTok and ByteDance and joining us here at BAYZ in order to build this out, and really, excited about the caliber of talent and people that we're getting on board here. I think we've seen this also recently with people like Ryan Wyatt leaving YouTube gaming, a huge move as he goes to Polygon to also build out, this industry in the Web3 space. So this is one of those situations also where you can, take a look at it, and even if you don't understand the nuances of it, you can at least see the people that are gravitating toward it, and it's pretty clear there's something special happening here.
Yeah, I think that, we've been seeing this for a while in esports with, people from, the famous phrase in esports, non-endemics, coming from non-endemics to esports. And those are generally big moves because they see the potential that esports have. And I think we're also seeing that now with not only blockchain gaming, but also in crypto companies, or as you mentioned with Polygon, sort of really focusing on gaming as creating the second layer for the Ethereum blockchain. And I think that it's, if esports moves fast, blockchain, I feel, moves even faster, if that's even possible. It's really hard to keep up with a lot of things. And I'm sure that you are, probably feel pretty tired at the end of the day by the amount of information that you consume.
Yeah. I realized early on I could not possibly keep up with everything, but I think I do a pretty good job. And one of the things that really helps us as well is that we're actually structured to be a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. But effectively what that means is that we're able to essentially decentralize, give control of the operations of the company to the community, the people that are contributing to help build BAYZ. And that is something that has really allowed us to go wide and to essentially, scale rapidly also by engaging community contributors. And it's one of the only ways that we can possibly operate all of these assets across all the games we're involved in, is by actually trusting the in-game team, the community members within each game that we've, recruited to help run the assets and stuff like that. So it's really an awesome model as well. And I think that it's well suited to keep up with the pace of this space. As you mentioned, it's a really fast moving space, to say the least.
You mentioned it a little bit before, but I'm curious to hear what sort of really inspired you to begin BAYZ and really take on this whole new direction in your career and this sort of uncharted territory for, especially, you're based in California. So definitely, I think a lot of your peers, while perhaps they're more into crypto and blockchain, but maybe less so in esports, and definitely maybe less in the overlap between the two. What pursued you to take on this new journey?
Great question. So I think for me in particular, I was able to really be in the scene and learn blockchain gaming from the ground level. So I started playing Axie Infinity in March of last year, and was in even just, when Axie Infinity had, I think it was 30,000 daily active users, which of course now they're in the millions. So I was able to just see, from my own perspective, that fast growth trajectory that they had. And what I also was able to see are people's lives being impacted, because even just with my own gameplay and my own assets that I had at the time, I was setting up the scholarship program, which is that structure of, owning your assets and lending them out to people around the world to utilize. And I had people in my personal scholarship who were putting food on the table because of the Axie Infinity account that they were playing. I had one player that was an elderly gentleman who was doing this to afford his medications. There was a single parent who this was their primary source of income for, providing for their family. And the fact that you can do that with video gaming is an amazing thing. And this is now the position that we're in with BAYZ, where, we're bringing blockchain gaming and play to earn gaming to Brazil and the world for the first time for so many different people. And the earning potential with the assets that we're putting together essentially is over what minimum wage is in Brazil. Minimum wage in Brazil is about $200 and you can make about 300 or 400 by playing some of these play to earn games. So even with, the current market, the current environment for blockchain gaming, as small as it is, we're able to create opportunities for people to earn twice that of minimum wage by playing video games. It's a pretty incredible thing. So I was hooked really early on by the impact they can have on people's lives. And then I was also sold that this was the future of, the games industry as a whole, right? Because we're not just talking about, any single title, Axie Infinity, but, I personally am just completely convinced that as soon as the players experience ownership of assets for themselves, it's going to become, an expectation for the player base, and then they're going to have, quality of games. And there are some amazing games, by the way, that are blockchain based games that will be launching this year. There's probably, hundreds that will be launching over the next few that are in development. A lot of these also are, AAA quality games, incredible ones like Illuvium and Star Atlas. And as soon as these games launch, right, then the users will be able to have a comparable user experience within these games from a graphics perspective, from a gameplay perspective, and then the choice becomes like really obvious to me, at least, right? I mean, if there's two comparable experiences, one blockchain based, one not, you're going to choose the one that you have ownership of the assets in, and you can actually maybe even make it a little bit also while you're having fun. So to me, that's really without a doubt the future here.
Yeah, I mean, what you're just talking about sort of made me think about, what was sort of the first ways that people, not publishers, were able to make money playing games, right? And that was arguably probably esports in its sort of primitive era of being able to be really good at a game and enter a tournament and maybe you win something. And then as the internet sort of became more and more normalized, that maybe became making content around games, making funny videos or these types of things. And you're using the game as, the sort of, I guess, visual asset and just content for your content. And now those have developed side by side and in a lot of ways intertwined, with esports orgs. They're creating content for people to consume and they're creating content for their sponsors, but they're also winning tournaments and stuff. But it isn't really anything in game that is rewarding them other than it's other people. It's external, right? It's coming from people that are supporting them from being their Patreon or buying their merch because they like their content or whatever, but it's not actually coming from the game itself. So I absolutely agree that this is definitely a turning point and super interesting development in the gaming space. And like sort of switching gears a little bit, but related, what I think is interesting with especially blockchain gaming and just sort of blockchain and crypto is the divide between how the gaming community views these assets and the technology basically, and how the crypto community views it. I think a perfect example was the 100 Thieves most recent NFT that they didn't market as an NFT at all. They used NFT technology, blockchain technology to give fans ownership of a digital asset, but they didn't approach it in the same way that, many NFT projects approach it in terms of, hey, this is, speculative. It's a very rare amount. You have to know about it first, get in the early. It was very, the antithesis of what a crypto community NFT project would look like, but that really did appeal to the gamers. And so I'm curious BAYZ is sort of branded, especially, BAYZ.gg, that's more of like a gaming thing and more of an esports sort of signal to me. I know I was looking at your OpenSea and I saw that you own BAYZ.eth, so you have it. But that's not sort of like, I think branding wise, I'm curious to hear about you and your partner's approach there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great point. Speaking from BAYZ's perspective first, we do consider ourselves as, a gaming organization, just like what you might find in traditional gaming with 100 Thieves, with NRG. And the reason for that is that we take a very similar, path within our industry. And so we're very focused on esports. We have one of the top Axie Infinity teams in the world contracted to us. We have one of the top Fate and Arena teams here as well. So, any blockchain based game that's going to have an active esports scene, we want to be present and leading the way there. We're also really active on the content side, which of course is one of the primary operations of esports organizations nowadays, and even also often the primary revenue stream, right, is in sponsorships. So we have a great content focus as a company. So we have signed some incredible content creators. We've announced a lot of them already. We have some big ones that we're waiting also a little bit later this month. So something to keep your eyes out for there. But we've now signed creators that just have millions and millions of fans across social media platforms. And what we're doing is essentially acting as a hub for their audience to learn about this new phenomenon. So, definitely, again, with us being so focused on educating people and, paving the way for people to get involved and to do research in the scene, content is a great way to do that. So we definitely do consider ourselves, an organization from that perspective. But the other thing that's important to note is I think that blockchain technology really opens up some beautiful use cases for esports and events. This is something that we actually really actively work on with a lot of the top blockchain-based games, is how to effectively, use esports within their titles. And one of the functions actually that I think is really exciting is the ability to essentially distribute payments to players at scale. And this is something in the traditional gaming industry. There's always been this push for esports for everyone. You want a esports circuit that's open to the public so anybody can participate, and you want it to be approachable, right, to the viewer, right, and something that's relevant for them and their experience in playing, and set a path, right, so that anybody can get involved. But it's really difficult, functionally, to actually reward people for doing that. So the prizes, even if you do try to accommodate for hundreds of thousands of players, you can't realistically distribute 100,000 payments to everybody that participates, right? Well, in blockchain gaming, you actually can, because it's a lot more straightforward, right? Any player that's participating in an event, you have their wallet ID, because that's attached to their game account. And that also is the wallet where you're able to distribute payments in a really automated fashion. And so one thing that I'm really excited about is the ability for blockchain-based technology to be used to bring esports for everyone and to gamify participation. Even if you're just sending out, a few dollars to every player for participating in an event, I mean, that's something that you can do with just a few lines of code. So really excited about that. And I think that, as blockchain gaming grows and the viewership grows, as the player base grows, we're going to also have a healthy esports scene that develops as a consequence.
I mean, it's, I think, too early to really tell how things are going to be shaping up, but how do you anticipate, esports developing in the titles that you guys are participating in? I'm sure maybe you also have a hand in helping figure out how this goes, but how do you anticipate blockchain gaming esports developing, potentially per title or per genre? Or, I mean, yeah, tell me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you can probably imagine, it depends on the game, but we're seeing a lot of different strategies be implemented. A lot of people right now are turning the keys over to the community and empowering community organizers to really jumpstart, the esports scenes, which is something that, of course, we have seen also in traditional gaming, but that's a very crypto mentality, right? Decentralizing and giving power to the people. And so there's actually, to use Axie Infinity as an example, they're really paving the way when it comes to empowering community esports operations. They've set up a fund with, I forget the exact number, but it's something like, $5 to $7 million worth of prizing that is going to community organizers, just, by way of the publisher providing AXS token as a prize pool for these events. And so it's really an amazing thing. So I think that that's kind of a first step for a lot of these games, is to, again, empower the community, subsidize operations from that perspective. But then, yeah, what thing that we're starting to see also develop is, things like regional events start to really pop up, right? So that in Brazil, for example, BAYZ wants to be hosting regional championship events to find the best players in Brazil. And that's especially effective, using esports to branch into a new market. So yeah, really excited about what we're seeing right now from an esports perspective. But one thing that I think is still a little bit off in the future, but on the horizon to be sure, is also these types of titles that are, kind of always on esports, if you will. So that, using an example, EVE Online is a classic example from traditional gaming, where these ships that they're using in this game, it's a space-based fighting game, are really expensive, right? You actually do put lots of money into upgrading your ship and crafting items and stuff. And what you end up finding in this game there are massive battles that take place just in the normal gameplay, right, of this title, that you end up having like millions and millions of dollars of assets sometimes destroyed in these fights of these huge alliances and start in EVE Online going after each other. And that's something that I think actually we're going to see a little bit more of also in blockchain gaming, because it is kind of this open world structure a lot of times and always on gameplay. And there's also a focus on guilds or alliances or clans. And so there's clan warfare in a lot of these titles as well. And so with that, right, also comes the high stakes of these assets that are worth, like tangible value potentially being destroyed. So that's not necessarily esports in the truest sense, but it's that competitive aspect in the gameplay itself that I think is also going to be really intriguing, especially from a content perspective.
Yeah. And I think, so what you're talking about reminds me of a bit of earlier EverQuest, or how World of Warcraft had sort of always on PvP zones that, if you controlled this area, and you were part of the faction, you would have a certain buff, or especially with EverQuest, if you died, you invested so much time and potentially had to buy gold. So you invest a lot of money in this character, and then it's gone forever. Excuse me. But those were sort of limited, or the rules that were made with the game, right? EverQuest didn't necessarily have to put that in the core gameplay, and same with World of Warcraft didn't have to. They thought that this was interesting, but with blockchain gaming and having it all tied into the blockchain and how everything works, this is sort of native into it. It's, yeah, for sure, design choice. Maybe not every title is going to be interested in this, but that the capability is there, and it doesn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every time that you're putting together a new engine or something like that. So super fascinating. Do you know of any new titles coming out this year that potentially are built around more of this competitive play, always on type thing, not necessarily esports, but more PvP focused?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's actually really important to note is that I think this is a broader trend that's taking place right now in blockchain gaming, is that, what we found in Axie Infinity as a concrete example is that there was, for a period of time, an oversupply of SLP, which is the utility token, the cryptocurrency that you earn by just playing the game. So there was an oversupply of that versus how it could be used in the game in order to actually upgrade characters or have utility. And so what we found is the price, ended up going down. But publishers, the publishers saw that, Sky Mavis saw that, and they started to make adjustments, right? Recognizing, hey, we need to control the supply of the token. And so what they did is they actually implemented a new distribution system that's based a lot more on MMR and leaderboard placement. And so what we're finding is that actually is true now, generally across the board, much more now than it was maybe 6 months ago in this space, where the actual rewards and earning potential within these games is much more tied to a player's competitive level than it was, prior. So I think just generally speaking, we're going to see that continue, because it especially is a much more effective and controlled way of distributing, the actual utility token to players in a measured way that's sustainable for the economy as a whole. When it comes to, what titles I'm particularly excited about from an esports perspective, Axie Infinity, of course, is going to be all, right up there. They're still leading the way when it comes to esports and blockchain gaming right now. Another title to watch is Phaeton Arena, which is very similar to Brawl Stars, but just on blockchain gaming. And so that's a title, again, Brawl Stars Esports is one I'm hugely a fan of as a mobile gaming guy. So definitely expect that to have a healthy competitive scene. But there's a lot of them. I mean, Meta Soccer, I mentioned that previously already, but that's this wonderful crossover of sports and esports and blockchain gaming and everything. And so there's this great opportunity as well to get existing football clubs in a really novel way. We're also seeing that in a game called Rumble Kong League, which is one I'm personally a huge fan of, which is essentially a 3v3 basketball game where your players are NFTs. And so there's a lot of opportunity for crossover. Paul George, NBA player, is an investor, and Steph Curry as well as a partner, and doing some fun stuff there. So really already seeing, even in these couple titles, Meta Soccer and Rumble Kong League as examples, a lot of opportunity for crossover with existing sports franchises and celebrities as well.
I mean, we've also seen recently, especially during the pandemic, with the launch of Valorant and Among Us and what else, Fall Guys, that that a lot of developers have taken to utilizing the streamers and content creators into not only the community but with the promotion of it, and also making titles to be streamed, not necessarily to be played by yourself when you get home from work, but really that it is an entertainment, and it fosters this parasocial relationship that is so, I think, in a way, endemic in esports. And also, especially with Valorant, making a new title that is esports ready. Do you see this also becoming a trend or continuing into blockchain gaming? I mean, blockchain gaming is much younger than traditional gaming, of course, but it seems that everybody learns pretty quick and is taking inspiration from all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, whether these titles are esports ready, I mean, they're definitely being designed for esports, right? With the distribution models, like I talked about, and the emphasis on competitive game modes. So definitely see, blockchain gaming playing a huge role there. And if you believe that blockchain is the future of gaming, I mean, esports is going to be part of that too, right? So where are we going to be 5 years from now, right? With blockchain gaming growing at this pace, right? Just imagine what 5 years is going to be. So I'm really excited about that. And we're also, starting to see a lot of interest in kind of the first explorations of, traditional games publishers like Ubisoft and many more, delving into NFTs and blockchain and, integrating that into their existing titles. So this is going to be happening, very quickly, right, in the grand scheme of things. But there's so much excitement and discussion right now, even just amongst AAA publishers and traditional games, about the role of blockchain gaming and how it's to be used and stuff. So I think we're going to see even more and more, existing publishers getting involved too.
Based on what you were just saying, reminds me of like this concept that I wrote about in this newsletter that I write for Esports Insider called Heat Map, where I'm sort of seeing, or from my perspective at least, sort of seeing potentially the end of like this vanilla esports, which is how we have it at the moment, which is, the model with the developers, producing these titles, but also holding on to all the media rights. All the content and everything is free for everybody to watch, but then the orgs are participating for these big prize pools, and they're paying for a lot of things with their sponsors and partners, and creating content as part of that partnerships, and just how the things have developed over the past 20 years. But also seeing that on the horizon there is potentially a fork, which is leading to what I'm calling like Desports, of decentralized esports, which is utilizing more than just, the crypto platform, big money, utilizing more than just having fan tokens, like really more going an alternative route of esports. So with, the previous model, I think that will definitely stick around, but that blockchain gaming and NFTs and this alternative aspect of, especially also being able to raise funds and do it in this very different way than how esports has in a way modeled itself a little bit more after sports and other aspects. But this is using what's sort of normalized in the crypto community and how this has developed. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, because at least from my perspective, that you are one of the people that is at the forefront of, how you're running your organization, and coming from, traditional esports background. I mean, less traditional because mobile was, niche in your community, but then taking the step. So really interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective, right? To consider what esports looks like if it's decentralized, because I could really see that also being how blockchain gaming, shapes and forms. I mentioned even a couple times earlier, right, how we're already starting to see the beginning of that with publishers like Sky Mavis of Axie Infinity releasing millions and millions of dollars to the community, right, to organize tournaments for themselves. That's a decentralized esports structure. Right, with players being rewarded based on MMR, right? So that the top competitive players, yes, maybe you're signed to an organization and you're getting a salary. Maybe you've got content channels and can do sponsorships there. But also, if you're at the top of the leaderboard, you're also taking home some money at the end of every month or every season in this game, right? So that's one thing that is just so amazing about blockchain gaming, is that there's a direct revenue model that is in place that is just not there in games that are not based on the blockchain, right? And so you have to get creative and get a bunch of eyeballs that you can then find ways to monetize. And, most esports players can't really do that, at least, at scale to where they can sustain themselves. So there's fewer revenue streams available to players, perhaps. But in blockchain gaming, as long as you can play well and be at the top of the leaderboard, you've got a chance to take home, a good amount of money as well, just by playing the game. So I'm really excited and, bullish, to be sure, about the future of esports in this space. Really it's going to be built by, those companies in the scene here and people that are in the esports industry that are coming over. And one thing that's worth mentioning kind of along these lines is that, BAYZ is also acting, kind of as a partner for companies that are in Web 2 branching over into Web 3, right? And so I'm really excited to see that happen in the near future with esports. We're talking with a lot of companies right now about, what it would look like for them to transition into Web 3 and to be active in blockchain gaming. And, there's even lots of really creative models and use cases for, tokens or, community engagement programs and stuff using NFTs that a lot of companies haven't really thought about up to this point, right? And they're considering that for the first time. So, we're acting, just like YGG did for us as an accelerator, right, to expedite our growth. That's kind of how we find ourselves now in this situation, where we're able to take companies, yes, from traditional gaming and esports and stuff, but to help really expedite their growth and transition here into Web3.
I know a lot of esports partnerships in general help, non-endemic brands move into the esports space in some sense, right? And that can be part of a marketing spend of, okay, we're having this partnership. Now our brand is associated. Now, the customers that we're trying to reach now feel that we're involved in something that they love and care about. So then we can garnish sentiment there, and that, leads to in this direction, right? Of a successful partnership also not only helps facilitate the growth of the organization, but also helps with the brand and, attracting new customers and new products that the customers love, and et cetera. Do you see such a model working perhaps with BAYZ, or working within the sort of blockchain gaming and sort of what I'm calling Desports model of having sponsors involved to help, as you were saying, bridge the gap into the next phase in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly the role that we're playing. So I actually completely agree. We're working with a lot of companies right now where we're, designing their entry into this space, right? And how to reach this audience for the first time. And I think it's also really interesting to see that, even in traditional esports, what we're finding is that crypto as a category is becoming one of, if not the largest category of sponsorships for esports organizations, right? With companies like FTX and what they're doing with TSM. And so, it's a no-brainer to me that kind of advertising interest is also going to be there in the blockchain gaming space. And we're seeing that already with, all of the users and fans of BAYZ are also, avid crypto users. And so we're really strong, target for the market that they're trying to reach.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these crypto partnerships, in esports, especially revolve around an education content aspect of helping, the esports audience understand more about what the blockchain is and how crypto works and how to get involved and all these things. And also, as the technology is developing, it's easier and easier to use it. The UI is not so clunky and it makes more sense. There's more things going on and all this. So it becomes a bit less esoteric for sure. But also, at least from how I'm looking at it, is that, crypto has a lot of money and wants more users, and notice that esports also wants more money. Like esports, definitely orgs, especially with how revenue works, so that the partnership just really sort of makes sense in a lot of ways. And I think that's why we saw it a lot last year. And we've also been seeing, everybody's talking about, crypto in the Super Bowl, right? They've been really tapping into sports and all these things. If where my thinking is going ends up happening, where would you see sort of the bridge happening, or where could we anticipate like a real bridge happening of, okay, esports is going this way, and then the sort of parallel universe of Desports or what have you is going this way? Where could you anticipate a split being?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think as time goes on, what we're going to find is that more esports companies are going to be active in blockchain gaming. And that's just a consequence of blockchain gaming growing and gaining more popularity and traction. So that's certainly going to be inevitable, right? We've seen already a couple of use cases, as we've talked about kind of the first entries or explorations into the space. But I think, over time, there are going to be more companies that look at blockchain gaming as a primary function of what their model is. It could just also be, another aspect of what they do as a company, right? Will decentralized esports completely usurp traditional esports? I don't know. I think we're a little too early to potentially have that conversation. So, any companies that are really heavily focused here on the esports industry, I'd imagine, and are having success here, or, would likely stay. But, as far as when that divergence may happen, so there's a lot of blockchain games that are going to be launching this year. And there's a lot also that are in development of these AAA type titles that may take until next year to actually fully roll out. So at that point, again, is when I'm really imagining the choices being in front of players, right? Here are these comparable experiences, comparable games, and I get to choose now, right? I can play what I know and love, traditional gaming, or I can choose this other option that is just as fun. But in this case, I own the assets and I can, trade them, sell them. I can maybe make a little money. And so that to me is what the tipping point will be for the industry as a whole. And if that's the case, then the audience and player base will develop to a point where it becomes a real, area of focus for lots of companies in the esports and gaming industry.
Matt, thank you so much for being on the show, my man. It was a really, really great conversation. Where can people?
This has been a blast. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, the best place is to connect with me on Twitter. I'm at the MobileMatt, but you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, Matt Rutledge, and my email as well is matt@bayz.gg. Awesome.
And your website, bayz.gg, so people can head there to check out the content. And also, I have it here at BAYZGG on Twitter as well. Again, thanks so much for being on the show, and really enjoyed having you. And we'll speak soon, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, Kerry. Really appreciate it.